say from the start that I certainly feel like an imposter of sorts with just one article in my career on Herodotus, and that from many years ago. It seems to me I should be calling the Herodotus helpline rather than addressing the group. And as I see the number of people logging on, I am humbled by the presence of so many people who've done so much interesting work in Herodotus and in other areas. But what great fun to have an opportunity to talk a little bit with all of you. What I'd like to do, first of all, is talk relatively briefly about the place of my 1994 article within my broader scholarly corpus and my interests, and then focus in on the article itself and the context in which I wrote it. So to begin with the big picture, I don't know that this is absolutely the beginning of it all, but I started graduate work at Princeton in 1982 and planned to focus on Greek tragedy. And as you probably would surmise, that's not really what happened for me. It was really Bob Connor at Princeton who drew me to Greek historiography. His 1984 Thucydides came out in my early years as a graduate student. And for me, it really opened up the possibilities of studying the literary dimensions of historical writing. So though I left my thoughts of tragedy largely behind, it seemed to me part of the attraction of historiography, and I think in particular in this period, is that people were starting to look at historical writing not just as a historical source, but as a literary product itself. And in retrospect, it all seems, probably very obvious to all of us that of course you need to look at historical writing in these terms, even if you plan ultimately to use it as a historical source. You can't separate the writing from the content. But I went on to do my special author with Bob Connor on Thucydides. But I should mention too that I did special field work with Jim Luce on epideictic oratory. And that got me going on oratory and a number of other things. But the two areas, Thucydides and epideictic oratory, maybe somewhat strangely came together in my dissertation, Danger and Its Rewards, a study in Athenian self-presentation, that drew on Thucydides, but also the Epitaphioi and Isocrates. This was the period when Nicole Leroux's L'Invention d'Athènes came out, and helpfully in English translation, I think that was in 1985 or so, and I'm certainly working under that influence. So I finished graduate school in 1987 and had a 3-year visiting appointment at Oberlin before taking up a tenure-line job here at Indiana University. Those 3 years after graduate school turned out to be precious time for me. I think graduate education has evolved a lot since the time I went to graduate school. I must say there were a lot of gaps in my coverage of the classics at that point, and there still are a lot of big gaps. But the neat thing for me in that early period was that I felt relatively free to explore my interests and follow wherever they might go. And in that period, for me, two competing interests, maybe complementary, emerged. One Greek historiography, the other Athenian democracy. And Athenian democracy eventually hijacked my scholarly program. I don't blame Athenian democracy for it. It was an exciting period in the late 80s and early 90s for the study of Athenian democracy. And the publication of Josh Ober's 1989 Mass and Elite in Democratic Athens really got me intrigued by how Athenian democracy worked and class relations and so forth. So really all my books have focused on some aspect of Athenian democracy, Athenian litigiousness, bad citizenship, limits of altruism in Athens, and then my current book that came out this past fall on Xenophon and the Athenian democracy. Now, it may seem that represents a complete turning away from Herodotus and historiographical work, but I'd say that there are perhaps more connections than meet the eye. In my work on Athenian democracy, I've been especially interested in individual and group self-presentation. I think if I had to at least summarize, some of my strong interests in at least several of the books, I would say that they might fall under that larger rubric of individual and group self-presentation. But I would also observe, as far as the connection with Herodotus, is I think that my work on Athenian democracy reflects a sort of Herodotean interest in and amusement by posturing, manipulation, and deception. And I think if you're looking at the self-presentation of a historian and the construction of a persona, it's natural in some ways to ask how were others in this case, in my work in ancient Athens, how were they presenting themselves, posturing, and competing with one another. So I'd say there are at least some threads of connection from that early work on Herodotus to my later work on Athenian democracy. But to borrow Herodotus's terms, the road of my story is taking me rather far away from 1994. So let me now focus in on the article and the context in which it was written. So I was interested to watch the YouTube video of Carolyn DeWald's presentation of how she came to be interested in the sorts of things she was interested in Herodotus. And she referenced the personal impact that the participating in the Arethusa volume from 1987 that Deborah Bodeker organized, what an impact that had on her. And I must say that that volume was really critical for me as I began to get to know Herodotus in that period. I'd say for one thing that that this was key for drawing my focus from Thucydides to Herodotus. I'd worked on Thucydides, as I mentioned, in graduate school. But it also drew me naturally to the topic of Herodotean self-presentation. Carolyn DeWald's piece in particular in that Arethusa volume on Herodotus's authorial voice really got me thinking about Herodotus, and made me start to, wonder, more about what he intended to do, and what really he is engaged in the histories. I'd first read Herodotus through in translation as an undergraduate at Carleton College. And I must say, as a first-time reader of Herodotus, and perhaps some of you had the same experience, I was confused, baffled. It was hard to keep track of all the different strands. And I found myself at many points wondering, now, how did we get here from where we started? And I think for me, an attraction of de Wald's approach and focus on Herodotean self-presentation is that it provided a way of beginning to figure out what this work might be attempting to do by looking closely at the multiple interventions within the work of its narrator. Rather obviously, it's a little harder to get to know the remote and fairly evasive Thucydides, who doesn't intrude explicitly in his text anywhere near as much as Herodotus. And I think that was part of the attraction too, is that there's this wide body of material that Carolyn de Wald had collected and analyzed that allowed us to probe how the author might have been viewing his enterprise. So as far as what got me going on inquiring kings, I saw Rosaria Munson's face pop up in the Zoom here. And I'd say more than anyone else, really, it was Rosaria's work that got me thinking about inquiring kings. She had written very interestingly about Cambyses and how Cambyses appeared as a sort of perverse histor within Herodotus's histories. Others as well, I mean, had noticed and commented on some of the inquiring kings that I eventually focused on. So I can't pretend that I discovered inquiring kings. Others, so often in scholarly enterprise, others had begun to look at Herodotus's kings and this facet of them. But for me, I started, I reread the entire histories and began to collect evidence. Now, I'm giving you the scholarly context. I should just briefly tell you, as I'm sure you all have experienced yourselves, that there may be a scholarly context, but there's always a personal context and your physical surroundings. And I just wanted to say that I wrote much of this article when I was on research leave in Washington, D.C., in my in-laws' attic. And there's surely a joke to be made here about Attic Greek, but I won't go there. And I would just add the detail that part of the time as I was writing this, I was wearing my baby daughter in first of three in a sling. And I suspect many of you have been there, as far as the sling in front of you, having to back up so you can reach the keyboard, and hoping that the baby will sleep just a little bit longer so you can make a little bit more progress. Fond memories in looking back on them. As I worked on this article, as far as my recollections, there was really much more pleasure than toil. And I don't want to suggest that my sole experience of scholarship is toil. Not at all. But I'd say more than anything else that I was involved with, this really was a delight to work on. And for me to comb through the text for material and then finding more and more the closer I looked, it really, there was a kind of joy of discovery. And I don't know if I looked at it this way at the time, but a joy of discovery as a 20th century inquirer looked into this ancient inquirer who himself was looking into kingly inquirers. I also, as I wrote, I found that I was constantly amused at what I was finding, and at Herodotus's amusement at his frequently inferior kingly inquirers. And I considered making the subheading of the final section of the paper, "The King and I," the title of the entire paper, just as a sort of whimsical thing. But anyway, I kept it as a subtitle. So that's my broad experience in writing this. It's always a funny thing to reread your work, and especially as the years go by. As I reread my 1994 article in preparation for this gathering, I didn't find myself feeling major regrets or feeling that I needed to recant significant parts. One little thing I noticed is perhaps I would use the word irony a few less times. Maybe that was a period thing, and a word used for lack of a better way of trying to identify the nuance of the text. It seems to me that a strength of the article is the fact that it focuses on Herodotus's relation as inquirer with his inquiring kings, and its categorization of different types of inquiry in which he and his kings engage and overlap. It seems to me, though, that that strength, the focus on those kinds of questions, could also be viewed as a sort of weakness, or at least as a limitation of the article, in that that these parameters do shape the nature of the article, and certainly kept me from looking into other kinds of questions that scholars since 1994 I think have done well to draw attention to. I find it interesting, first of all, that scholars have pointed out that Herodotean kings engage in other activities besides inquiry that overlap with those of the narrator of the histories. Jonas Grethlein, in a fine 2009 article, for example, argues that Xerxes appears as a deficient interpreter of the past in the famous Persian council scene at the start of Book 7, and thus contrasts with the narrator of the histories who more successfully engages with the past. So that's one way of looking beyond my article, looking to the kings and other kinds of quasi-historical activities that they engage in. A second interesting strand I find that moves beyond the focus of my article is some scholars have pointed out that Herodotus explores and defines his role in the histories through his portrayal not only of inquiring kings, but a range of characters. And I see my former student, David Branscombe, is in our session here. David, I think, has made a very interesting case in his 2013 book, Textual Rivals, Self-Presentation in Herodotus's Histories, that Herodotus explores his role in many different ways, And I would just flag one part of that book that I thought was especially interesting, where David looks at how Herodotus explores his role through his account of Aristagoras in his map. So that seems to be a natural way to build on this, my earlier focus on just inquiring kings, as David puts it, as textual rivals. I welcome the contributions of these and other rival inquirers, and see their work as complementing and genuinely moving forward from my 1994 piece. It was never meant to be the last word on the subject, and it's fascinating to me to see how new ideas and approaches can enrich our understanding of Herodotus.